scene. You're an Israelite, you're 25 years old, born around 1431 BC. Born in the desert, you've lived your entire life walking around in the sand, living in a tent, never having a permanent home. Your parents have told you tales of the joy of being freed from slavery in Egypt. They've told you the dramatic chase out of Egypt and their awe when God split the Red Sea for them to walk through. But they've also told you then how the hope of the promised land slowly faded away. You were born a few years after the 12 spies visited the so-called promised land and brought back their report of its invincibility, saying the land God had promised was full of giants and there was no point trying to conquer it. Despite hearing that, all the spies agreed it was despite hearing that, not all the spies agreed it was hopeless. But your parents remember that it was at that point that they stopped believing they would ever enter the land of milk and honey. You're not sure the land of milk and honey even exists. You wonder whether it would have been better off staying in Egypt. Your faith isn't the strongest anymore. You ask yourself, what was the point in the plagues and the splitting of the Red Sea, the manna from heaven, the beautiful tabernacle that took all our gold? What was the point of that? So we can wander around the desert for a lifetime. Well, it's now 1406 BC. It was in 1446 BC, 40 years ago, that your people entered the desert. A few months ago, Moses died, the great leader, the only leader you've ever known. There was 30 days of mourning, and then the 12 tribe leaders appointed Joshua. Don't know much about him. He was one of the 12 spies we talked about earlier, but he's now our leader. Good luck to him. We don't have much hope. Moses couldn't get out of this desert, then no one can. But 3 days ago, things started to change. Messengers moved through the camp saying, get your provisions ready. 3 days from now, you will cross the Jordan here to go in and take possession of the land of the Lord your God is giving you for your own. Not sure I believe it though. Been here for 40 years. Why would you suddenly cross that river in 3 days' time? But then this morning the messengers came again and they said, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. But keep a distance about 2,000 cubits between you and the Ark. Do not go near it. Consecrate yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things among you. And they did. The ark bearers began walking. The people followed at a distance. Well, out of curiosity, could this be it? After 40 years and my 25 years in the desert, could we finally be entering the promised land? But just as hopes begin to raise, in the distance we see we're walking towards the mighty river Jordan in full flood. We're confused, we're worried. We're expected to swim across that. Joshua and the leaders at the front just walk towards this huge river like it's nothing. This is when it starts to get special. As soon as the priests who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away, a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan, where the water flowing down to the Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry ground, while all Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Wow. That must have been how your parents felt 40 years ago when the Red Sea parted for them. This Joshua guy, God must be with him. We're beginning to taste the milk and honey. And we know what happens next. We know the rest of the story with the Battle of Jericho. But sometimes, like with the Israelites' escape from Egypt, God seems to start something and it's all dramatic and it's all exciting, and it kind of fizzles out. Things start to stagnate. Nothing seems to happen. And this new kind of normal becomes the norm. You get adjusted to your life in the desert. It's better than what was before. It might not be what we've been promised, but it's better than what was before. What I want to do this morning is examine some of the key events that were important in the process that enabled the Israelites to leave the desert after 40 years and see what we can learn from that. I don't know if anyone remembers, back in 2019, it's still on, the audio of it's still on the website. Jeff preached a word entitled, Grasshoppers Don't Eat Grapes. And it looked at the story of the 12 spies sent into Canaan. I'm not going to go over all of that, but it's important to understand the theme, really, what happened there, just to remind ourselves. So I'm going to recap that from Numbers 13. Okay? So it's on the screen, or you can just listen or read, follow it. Numbers 13, and I'm starting at verse 16. So these are the names, just verse 15 is a list of names. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. But Moses gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. So he was one of the spies. When Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he told them, go through the Negev and then into the mountain region. See what the land is like, and whether the people living there are strong or weak, few or many. Is the land they live in good or bad? Do the cities have walls around them or not? Is the soil rich or poor? Does the land have trees or not? Do your best to bring back some fruit from the land. It was a season when the grapes were beginning to ripen. So basically, Moses sent these guys off on an elaborate shopping trip to get him some grapes and a bit of intel at the same time. So the men explored the land from the desert of Zin to the border of Hamath. They went through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ima, Shishai and Talmai lived. They were descendants of Anak. Hebron was built 7 years before zoning Egypt. When they came to the Eshcol Valley, they cut off a branch with only one bunch of grapes on it. They carried it on a pole between the two of them. They also bought some pomegranates and figs. So they called that valley Eshcol, which means bunch of grapes, because the bunch of grapes that the Israelites had cut off there. Right? So there was fruit. And a bunch of grapes that takes 2 men to carry on a pole between them, that's got to be quite a large bunch of grapes, hasn't it? And pomegranates and figs. When you've been in the desert for a long time, grapes, pomegranates and figs are going to be well worth it, aren't they? But then, 40 days later, they came back from exploring the land. They came back to Moses, Aaron, and the whole community of Israel at Kadesh in the desert of Paran, and they gave their report and showed them the fruit from the land. This is what they reported to Moses. We went to the land where you sent us. It really is a land flowing with milk and honey. Here's some of its fruit. But the people who live there are strong, and the cities have walls that are very large. We even saw the descendants of Anak there, and they were meant to be giants. Is the backstory. The Amalekites live in Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the mountain region, and the Canaanites live along the coast of the Mediterranean Sea and all along the river Jordan. But Caleb told the people to be quiet and listen to Moses. Caleb said, let's go now and take possession of the land. We should be more than able to conquer it. But the men who have gone with him said, we can't attack these people. They're too strong for us. So they began to spread lies amongst the Israelites about the land they had explored. They said, the land we explored is one that devours those who live there. All the people who live there are very tall. We saw Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak and Nephilim. We felt as small as grasshoppers, and that's how we must have looked to them. So when they heard this report, the people of Israel responded like this. They said, then all the people in the Israelite community raised their voices and cried out loud that night. They complained to Moses and Aaron, if only we had died in Egypt or this desert. Why is the Lord bringing us to this land? Just to have us die in battle? Our wives and children will be taken as prisoners of war. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? See, those 12 spies, they brought back a false report of that land. They were scared. And they thought, it's not worth trying. They could have crossed the Jordan at that point. If only the spies hadn't been scared. But because of their fear, the Israelites spent an extra 25 years in the desert. But remember Joshua? Now the leader? He was one of those spies. And what did he do at this false report? Well, this bottom bit here. 2 of those who explored the land, Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, we'll go with, tore their clothes in despair. People don't do that anymore, do they? They tore their clothes in despair. They said to the whole community of Israel, the land we have explored is very good. If the Lord is pleased with us, and he is, we will bring us into this land and give it to us. This is a land flowing with milk and honey. Don't rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land. We will devour them like bread. They have no protection, and the Lord is with us, so don't be scared of them. But Moses didn't listen to them. Moses and the people listened to the voice of fear and ignored Joshua and Caleb. So fast forward 25 years to Joshua being in power, he still remembers this. And to put it mildly, he's probably a little bit irked that he's had to spend the extra 25 years in the desert rather than cross, because he knows they could have crossed the Jordan then and defeated it. So when Joshua comes to power, what does he do? He sends out his own spies to explore the promised land. This is a story where they go into Canaan and they are hiding in Rahab's house. Not going to read the whole thing, but let's just look at this bit of it. So this is, the woman here is Rahab. So the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I don't know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was the time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went, don't ask me. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But actually, she'd taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stacks of flax she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. But before the spies lay down for the night, she went up to the roof and she said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord dried up the waters of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 kings of Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. This was 40 years after the Red Sea was parted, and they were still living in fear because of it. But the Israelites, they lost faith. The enemy was still living in fear of God. The enemy knew that God would win, but the Israelites were consumed with fear. So what did the spies do? They went down out to the hills, they forded the river and came to Joshua, son of Nun, and told him everything that happened to them. They said to Joshua, the Lord has surely given the whole land into our hands. All the people are melting in fear because of us. Finally, the spies have brought a true report of the situation. And I just think that's typical of how many Christians think of things. The enemy knows it will be defeated, but we let ourselves be convinced that yes, we'll land in milk and honey, but it's scary. We're not powerful enough to get there. We're not good enough to do that. Let's just walk in circles around this desert for 40 years instead. It's time to stop walking in circles. The enemy is defeated. We have the cross as proof of that. And God's victory on the cross was our victory on the cross. We, as I said last week, we wear the victor's crown. Jesus wears the victor's crown, and because of his victory, we can wear the victor's crown. Whatever circumstances are not of God that you face, they have already been defeated by God's victory in which we share. Illness has been defeated, poverty defeated, injustice defeated, poor mental health defeated. We have won. So let's stop believing in the false reports that the promised land is beyond our reach. Let's step into the river with God by our side and watch the waters part. Then what those messengers that Joshua sent out said? They said, when you see the Ark of the Covenant, the Lord your God, and the Levitical priests carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. We have never been this way before. There is always more. The Ark of the Covenant represents God. God will show us which way to go, because we have never been this way before. When you're in the desert, what do? You can be scared, and you can stay in the desert. You convince yourself in some sort of Stockholm syndrome that the desert isn't too bad. It's not worth the risk to do that. Or we can follow God. We may have never been this way before, but God will be with you. You were made for more than the desert. I think sometimes we don't even realise that we are in the desert. We don't even realise that God has more for us because we've become so accustomed to that way of life. But God always has more in store for us. So, let's just look at this verse. This is what God said to Joshua before they crossed the Jordan. He said, "Today I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, that they may know that as I was with Moses, still I will be with you." As I said, it's not God that wears the victor's crown, we wear the victor's crown. I wonder, as Joshua walked towards the Jordan, did he know those waters were going to part? Well, maybe not specifically. But he knew that God had it covered. And he knew that if he worked with God, it would all work out. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. Let's have the same belief. In partnership with him, the mountains will move, the rivers will part, and the world will be restored. Note, talking about partnership. Well, it's not about demanding, is it? If you go to God and say, "Oi, move that mountain," it's unlikely to move. God will probably say something like, "That mountain's quite fine where it is, thank you very much." But if we partner with him, if we understand his desires for us, then the rivers that need parting will part. So, are we ready to move out of the desert? God has so much more in store for us than we realise. Don't let the enemy convince us that the desert is the best that we can hope for. Don't be content with a lesser quality of life because we're scared it might not work out. Live in our heavenly identity and the waters will split. How many times have you not done something that you know would be better for you because you're scared it might not work out? How many times have we not taken that step of faith because we're worried that, what if I fail? What if it doesn't work? What if that doesn't happen? When we know that's going to be good for us to do that. So, what I want us to do here is I want us to picture some waters that we feel need splitting. Maybe that's a health issue. Maybe it's a financial issue. Maybe it's a job, a confidence issue, mental health problem. Maybe it's a relationship with somebody that you want restoring. Something deep down that you know is within God's power to sort it, but you've been too scared to set out into faith and sort. You've accepted something less than we deserve as God's child out of fear. Let's picture that problem as the water in front of you. Then we can imagine holding out our hand by our side. We feel God's hand take our hand. We look at God standing next to us. We look him in the eye and we say, "We've got this." Then hand in hand with God, we step out into the water. We watch the water split and we walk through the Jordan. Don't accept a lesser quality of life. Living God, help us to step out of the desert. Help us to boldly put a foot into the waters of the Jordan, knowing that you will split the sea for us. Help us to know that in partnership with you, we have no reason to fear, that the dark's not afraid of us. The dark's like, we shouldn't be afraid of the dark, but the dark's afraid of us. Help us never to reject something that is going to be good for us because we're worried about the outcome. We're worried that it won't succeed. But help us instead to work in partnership with you to ensure that it will be a success. Give us that confidence in every aspect of our lives. Amen.